This winter has been a little bit crazy with the absolute frigid temperatures we've seen and some of the snowstorms that we've already experienced. Operating radio equipment in winter can be both challenging and risky due to the harsh environmental conditions. But with proper preparation and maintenance, which are both crucial for successful operations, in this video, we're going to get into a detailed kind of guide to help navigate, the conditions and ensure your equipment is in top shape. So let's get into it.
Billions waking up to the threat of a major coast-to-coast winter storm. It's already arrived out west with some pretty big-time impacts, so we're expecting icing, heavy snow, and strong winds. High-impact storm. It's going to be a travel nightmare for millions across 25 states. Not a storm that you want to mess with, for sure.
So one of the things we always get into is preparation and planning. We all know being prepared is key, and having a plan before you head out is something that's good to do. So whether you're looking to go do a SOTA activation, a POTA activation, you're just going out to scout an area out, whatever it is, maybe you're just looking to get outside to help break some of the cabin fever because we've been shut inside for the last, almost month now because of the frigid temperatures. One thing we want to do is make sure we are monitoring. Always check the weather forecast before heading out. We want to be aware of rapidly changing weather conditions, which are common in winter. Another nice thing to do is if you have some sort of, Garmin watch that has the weather on it and can sense the changes in barometric pressure. If you get the alert that a storm's coming, even though it wasn't forecasted, maybe just the spot that you're in is going to experience, something somewhat freak that the forecasters didn't come. Use every tool to your advantage. Make sure you're staying, conscious of your surroundings, having good situational awareness, and that'll, help you out in the long run or in the short run right off the bat. And with that, it should be pretty common sense, but avoiding extreme conditions. Avoid operating during storms if you can, especially, heavy snow or other extreme weather conditions that could, potentially pose a danger to you or even your equipment. Make sure you're staying away from areas that are prone to flooding if you're dealing with some sort of, heavy rainstorm. If you're up in the mountains, especially in the wintertime, lots of snowfalls coming down, got to be worried about avalanches. You could be set up somewhere where, you don't know that, 300 feet above you, there's an avalanche ready to rip loose. And that's something we really got to be cognizant of if you're in that area. Another thing, even if you're not in the mountains and you just happen to be in the woods, campers are familiar with this, but widowmakers, falling trees, anything that could happen where if there's just extra weight on these trees from the snow, or maybe it's just a little bit windy, we don't want to have a tree come and fall on us and end our day. Beyond just what we, as far as our bodies go with dealing with the extreme temperatures, there's also the issue of your equipment performance. One of the things I think comes to mind with pretty much everybody, even our vehicles, but especially the radios, if they're going to be out in these temperatures, is battery care. Cold weather can significantly reduce battery capacity and efficiency. So try to keep your batteries warm by using, maybe an insulated case or pouch. In the absence of these, wrapping them in a blanket can also work, or just keeping them close to you, maybe not on your exterior, but inside, just inside like your most outer layer, just to keep some of your body heat against them. Also with that, if you have the choice, opt for lithium batteries over alkaline or nickel metal hydride, as they perform much better in cold conditions. Another thing you have to try to do or think about is, protect your displays and the cables. LCD displays and cables, they can be affected by the cold, and just, them being affected by it can reduce their performance and also cause potential damage. We know cold weather can have several effects on LCD screens. So one of the things you'll see are slower response times because the liquid crystals in LCD screens, they can become sluggish in cold temperatures. And again, that leads to these slower response times. And this means that it may take longer for the screen to update or even change images. With these temperature changes, also, we were just saying about, keeping them warm if you can, keeping inside your outermost layer, but we also have to worry about and deal with condensation, because when an LCD screen is brought from a cold environment to a warm environment, condensation can form on the screen and the internal components. This moisture can lead to malfunctions, electrical shorts, or even just a complete failure of the screen. And just real quickly, we always kind of comment on pace plans and knowing your equipment. And I think the knowing your equipment kind of falls right in to, associating this with the pace plan, because if your LCD screen were to fail, do you know what zones are in your radio? Do you have it programmed? So, for instance, if you press and hold the home button, you know where the radio is going to get you back to. And if you have your channel selector knob, do you know which, frequency is assigned to each channel so that you don't even have to use that LCD screen if it wouldn't be available? Another thing with these LCD screens is the physical damage that can occur, because extreme cold, the kind that we've been seeing from these polar vortexes that have been coming down, is that it can actually cause the liquid crystals to freeze, potentially leading to cracks or ruptures in the screen. Additionally, the contraction of materials at low temperatures can put stress on moving parts. So obviously that added stress would increase the potential for damage to occur. And another thing that comes up and can be really affected by the cold is if you have an LCD screen, that means that that is connected to a device that has a battery. Cold weather, like we were just saying, can deplete the battery more quickly and affect its performance. So that may affect just that alone, just a lower voltage on how the LCD screen is appearing.
Let me know if the audio sounds any good with this one. I'd like to compare it against the other one, which I think it might be failing.
Okay, well, this mic from that last transmission sounds crystal clear. We'll be right back. Well, I couldn't have planned that any better. Somebody was actually coming on to one of the local repeaters to check to see if his microphone was working, because he said he had been noticing issues with it. So he had set up his replacement, got the replacement mic going, was looking just to compare the audio quality from the new one to the old one. So kind of cool that I'm doing that in the midst of doing a video on the importance of maintaining your equipment in the winter, because, even your mobile radios, if you have those, corded, stretchy microphones, stuff gets brittle in the cold weather. So important to test this stuff, make sure it's working, take care of it. As far as some of those cords go, if you are worried about that becoming too brittle, a little bit of silicone spray, kind of wiping those down and keeping the rubber conditioned, can also be a really big benefit. But getting back to what we were saying, so the best thing I can kind of do to mitigate the risks as far as the LCD screens go is, most importantly, try to keep those screens within the recommended temperature ranges and avoid sudden changes in temperature. So, you've got to be within the best of your ability to do so. The one thing you also do want to try to do, though, is allow the device to reach room temperature before turning it on after you've exposed it to really cold conditions. So as far as some of your general maintenance items are concerned, one thing, obviously, with any electronic device, especially our radios, especially if you're using them in harsh environments, especially in the cold where it's, cold and wet, is we need to try to prevent as much corrosion from occurring as we can. Moving equipment between cold and warm environments can definitely cause condensation. That leads to corrosion and potential short circuits. If you can, obviously, if you're buying high quality gear, the equipment's pretty much sealed, but you want to try to seal your equipment in plastic bags before exposing it to temperature changes. And also, consider using those silica gel packets or desiccants to absorb any moisture that would get into the bag with it. And we kind of just addressed that a second ago when the guy coming on with radio check with his mic, but protecting your cables, avoid that brittleness. Cold temperatures make cables stiff and brittle. We want to use pliable cables designed specifically for cold weather if it's going to be out in those environments for an extended period of time. And then beyond that, we want to try to protect any of the connectors and joints with heat shrink tubing and electrical tape to just try to further prevent any damage. Now, another big one, and I think this one gets looked a lot at, especially with radio equipment, is you need to clean your gear regularly. Preventative maintenance is huge. Dust, dirt, grease, and moisture can accumulate on your equipment. So clean your gear regularly using, soft cloths, brushes, compressed air, or, even vacuums for, any little vented areas. What we obviously want to avoid is using water. We don't want to do that, or any sort of harsh chemical for that matter. Instead, something you can use, though, to try to get some stubborn dirt off would be to use alcohol or even contact cleaner designed for delicate parts. And right along with cleaning it goes inspecting and making repairs. So when we're cleaning these radios, you are conducting a visual inspection. We want to look for cracks, any loose connections, frayed wires, corroded terminals, Or even if you're having some sort of issue and you start to open things up and you're looking for, potentially burned components. If we recognize any of that stuff, obviously we want to replace any damaged or faulty parts and promptly, do that, so we don't just put it on the shelf, kind of forget about it. That way we can ensure the continuity of our, continued reliable operation. I then would say beyond the cleaning and the inspection would be testing and calibration. Before we start using our stuff, we want to ensure our equipment is in working order and properly calibrate it before heading out. Use a multimeter if you have one to check the power supply and battery voltages. We all know SWR meters to check for impedance matching. And if you have access to it, it's a really good thing to use an antenna analyzer for resonance and bandwidth, and a dummy load to test transmitter output power and modulation. And if you start to see changes in any of this stuff, and you've been kind of monitoring and tracking your equipment's performance along the way, you can very early identify potential issues that could, literally leave you, for lack of better terms, out in the cold if you get out in the field with something, and that's when it chooses to malfunction. And then I would say lastly with all this stuff, because we're kind of going in order, so we checked it out, then we used it, and common sense would be the storage of our gear. So making sure we do store our radios properly, we want to make sure that whatever area we're keeping them in is as in the best cool, dry, well-ventilated place that we can get. We want to avoid any direct, sunlight, heat, humidity, or dust. If they're going to be sitting for a while, remove the batteries and store those separately. And then, if you can, cover your equipment or put it in a proper case. That way we're just protecting them from any accidental drops, anything falling on them. And beyond that, just, a buildup of dust and moisture. So even though it's winter, when we do get a break, it is nice to get out and use our equipment. Make sure we're taking care of it. If you're in any sort of public safety, military type stuff, I think we've heard a million times, take care of your gear, the gear takes care of you. So this was just a little video on giving some tips on how to help maintain some of your comms gear, maybe a little bit better than you have been. So let me know in the comments if I missed anything or if you do anything differently. Also, let me know in the comments if you are doing this stuff and you, especially like which cleaners you're using on your gear, or even which cases you're storing them in, because we all know Pelican cases are very expensive, but every once in a while some really good knockoff brands pop up. So it's just kind of nice to share any of that information with anyone that comes along and watches this. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, be safe.